The main character wanted to reach the peak of martial arts, but he already knew it was a position he could never achieve, no matter how much he tried. Still, he was desperate to accomplish his goal. Because of this, he decided to follow a legend passed down through generations. The legend spoke of a golden fruit hidden within a sanctuary, guarded by a dragon. This fruit was said to grant immortality. After a long and difficult battle against the dragon, the main character finally reached the golden fruit. He was surprised to see that it truly existed. Sitting on the dragon's corpse like a conqueror, he prepared to eat the fruit. He was confident that consuming it would allow him to reach the peak of martial arts. His name was Gilfus Eldragon, hailed as the strongest in the world. Decades later, Gilfus grew old and lay on his deathbed. His family surrounded him, and his eldest son Gilliam sat beside him. Gilfus noticed his son's sadness and urged him to be strong, saying his time had come. Gilliam mourned the thought of losing his father, just as he had lost his mother. As Gilfus was about to pass away, he reflected on the fruit of immortality and realized it had been nonsense. However, he found comfort in the fact that he had been blessed with a wife and children. He told his children that he lived a good life and had no regrets, though deep inside, this was a lie. He regretted not having more time to reach the peak of martial arts. Moments later, he passed away. Suddenly, Gilfus opened his eyes again. Shocked, he wondered why everything around him looked different. His body felt light, and when he looked down, he realized he had baby hands. It dawned on him that he had been reborn as a baby, lying in a cot. He struggled to believe it, but calmed himself with the confidence of a 10-star warrior from his past life. He concluded that his situation was far from normal and began wondering who could have caused this. Then it struck him. The fruit he ate had not granted immortality. Instead, it had carried the power of reincarnation, just as he once suspected. This realization made him smile as he considered it a stroke of better fortune. With this, he believed he finally had the chance to reach the peak of martial arts. He soon noticed other babies around him. Since he was in a separate building, he assumed he had been reborn into the Eldragon family. However, he wondered why there were so many babies in the room. Just then, maids entered carrying feeding bottles. They picked up a baby goblin and began to feed it. Gilfus was stunned to see a goblin in the room and questioned what the maids were doing. After feeding it a red substance, the goblin suddenly exploded, splattering blood onto Gilfus's face. Horrified, he tried to understand what was inside the bottle. The maids then decided to dilute the substance and continued feeding it to the children. Soon, a maid grabbed Gilfus. He realized the content of the bottle was not milk, but something overflowing with magic. He could not believe they were giving such a dangerous substance to babies. When the bottle was pushed into his mouth, he tasted it and immediately recognized it as ancient dragon's blood. He was shocked at the madness of making infants drink dragon's blood. He understood why the maids had said they would dilute it. He wanted to spit it out, but remembered he had already swallowed some. He decided a small amount would not kill him. Noticing that other babies were spitting it out as well, he thought it best to do the same before he exploded. But then he reconsidered. If he absorbed all that magic power, he might surpass even his former self and finally reach the peak of martial arts. Though unsure of what was happening, he resolved to make the most of it. Determined, he drank the entire bottle, silently vowing to show everyone why they should not underestimate him. Even the maid was shocked to see him consume it so eagerly, though she was pleased that things seemed to be working in their favor. After finishing the bottle, he was placed back in his cot and realized the other babies had also survived the ordeal. Just like a normal infant, he felt sleepy after the meal and drifted off. 7 years later, Gilfus, now named Zeke Eldragon, was seen training his strength. He placed a boulder on his feet while doing one-handed push-ups, reaching 1,000 before pushing the stone away. Looking at his muscular body, he admitted that he loved it. He attributed all his strength to the dragon's blood he had consumed. The blood carried immense power, and even babies who drank only a little grew stronger than normal humans. Because Zeke had already absorbed the divine dragon's true source power in his past life, he was able to withstand every drop of the ancient dragon's blood. The transformation shocked even him. However, Zeke realized he was still only a 1-star warrior, leaving him disappointed, since he expected to be at least 4 stars. A star represented one's true source of power compressed to its limit. One envisioned their body as a universe, letting stars move within. The difficulty increased with each star, and Zeke had once reached 10 stars, the only person in history to do so. Now, 7 years after his rebirth as the son of the Dragon family head, Zeke lived as an illegitimate child. His mother had already died, and his father never showed his face. Zeke despised having such a worthless father. He discovered that he had reincarnated a millennium later into a world where the weak perished at the hands of the strong. There also existed a ritual known as the Dragon's Trial. Only babies who survived drinking dragon's blood were trained as Dragon warriors. Yet Zeke had received no training at all. He questioned the maid, but she only replied that she was not at liberty to say. He reminded her that those who passed the trial were supposed to receive combat training, yet he was surrounded only by maids with no instructors. The maid, like a doll, simply asked if he required anything, to which he answered no. Although frustrated, Zeke was capable of handling himself, focusing more on building his body than waiting for formal training. He asked the maid for information about other children in the main family, but she repeated the same answer, that she was not at liberty to say. Annoyed, Zeke wondered if that was all she could ever say. He asked if he was being mistreated in the house, but she denied it, saying they had orders to tend to his personal needs. Zeke noticed the maid was a 3-star fighter, meaning she could have trained him. Since she was no help, Zeke decided it was time to head into the forest. He could not believe he had lived with her for 3 years, without forming any real connection. Expecting a response, he received only silence, as the maid ignored him. In the forest, Zeke ate poisonous herbs that tasted awful, but he did not care. He considered it part of his training. Soon he sensed a faint trail following him. Wondering why someone would trail him without revealing themselves, he chose to ignore it and focus on what lay ahead. Suddenly, an angry boar appeared before him. At the same time, he noticed a strange black mist coming from his pursuer, something that had not existed in his past life. Still, he focused on the boar, which immediately charged at him. Zeke grinned as he drew its attention. Taking a perfect stance, he dodged with ease and delivered a punch straight to the boar's gut. The impact destroyed its insides, killing it instantly. He was impressed that even as a 1-star warrior, his light strike was enough to kill the beast. From this, he concluded that the quality of a star mattered more than the quantity. Carrying the boar on his shoulder, he returned home. As he walked, he admitted he was tired of being alone and considered going on an adventure. However, he realized the sea was the only place he could truly go. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure trailing Zeke was shocked. Not only had Zeke noticed him, but he had also defeated a boar with 1 punch, despite having no combat training. The observer concluded that Zeke was no ordinary child, especially considering his mother's early death and his father's neglect. He knew Zeke had never received a proper education. Still, because Zeke was the child of the family head, he could not be abandoned and was kept under surveillance. The mysterious figure realized that things were becoming more interesting. When Zeke returned home, he noticed visitors in the house. He sensed their strength and wondered what they wanted. Approaching the door, he listened to their conversation. He detected no killing intent and finally opened the door. Inside, he saw several men wearing clothes bearing the Dragon emblem. Curious, he asked why they had come and wondered what they wanted from him. Just then, the men informed Zeke that they had come to take him because he needed to undergo an examination. Zeke nearly lost his mind upon hearing this, as no one had told him anything about an examination. Soon afterward, he was brought to the main house. He had never expected to return after 1,000 years, having been away for so long. At the house, the men dressed him in a school uniform. It turned out that he had been brought not for luxury, but to attend the academy known as Dragon's Nest. The academy had been established by the Dragon family, and every child born into the family was expected to enroll. Education began at the age of 7, and today was the entrance examination. However, Zeke had received no education at all. Despite this, he had no choice but to take the exam, which explained why he had been brought all the way from the forest. Frustrated by the situation, Zeke bowed his head in pain. As other students walked past him, one of them, a blue-haired boy named Langus, approached. Langus, from Old Scale Village, asked if Zeke was all right or in some kind of trouble. Zeke turned to him and rudely asked what he wanted. Langus, appearing timid, explained that he was only trying to help because Zeke looked troubled. Zeke was shocked by the approach, noting that Langus seemed shy but sensed some power running through him. Standing up, Zeke apologized for being rude and introduced himself, explaining that he was simply confused about the family head's plans for the examination. Langus assured him that the exam content did not change from year to year. Zeke clarified that he had no idea what the exam was about, leaving Langus shocked. Langus wondered if Zeke would be all right, given his complete ignorance of the exam, and decided to explain. Just as he began, a group of bullies appeared, calling Langus a runt. Zeke was shocked to hear this insult. The group was led by Retin, also from Old Scale Village. Retin mocked Langus, asking why a runt like him was taking the examination instead of going home to play. Langus, failing to catch the insult, replied that he was there for the exam, which only angered Retin further. Retin called Langus a piece of trash, claiming no one like him could ever enter the academy. He mocking his father as a mock dragon. Zeke noticed Langus clenching his fists in anger. The Eldragon family operated under an absolute monarch. Rookies were known as lesser dragons, common soldiers as young dragons, and captains as adult dragons. Sitting at the top were the elders or executive class, known as elder dragons. At the bottom were those deemed trash, called mock dragons, those who had failed to enter the dragon's nest or could not graduate from the academy. Langus wanted to prove that such individuals were not fakes. Zeke decided to join the conversation, asking Retin how he could declare Langus trash without the latter even taking the exam. Retin, shocked by Zeke's interference, demanded to know who he was and why he was involved. Zeke replied calmly, stating he only wanted to understand why Retin considered Langus incapable. Retin responded that Langus and people like him were weakling. Zeke was taken aback and told Retin that Langus was stronger than he and his gang. This angered Retin, who asked if Zeke was implying they were beneath someone like Langus. Before the situation could escalate, an examiner arrived, announcing that the entrance examination was about to begin. The examiner instructed the applicants to pick a number tag after registering. Retin glared at Zeke, vowing to remember his face. Zeke, surprised by the hostility, wondered why youths were so short-tempered. Langus noted that anyone would be angry if called weak. Zeke asked if the exam was mandatory, and Langus explained that withdrawal was allowed if one felt unprepared. This surprised Zeke, but further proved to Langus that Zeke knew nothing about the exam. Langus advised him to withdraw to avoid injury, but Zeke had no intention of doing so. Langus was surprised at Zeke's confidence despite his ignorance. Zeke suggested they proceed, and soon all applicants were gathered. The examiner explained the rules. Each student needed to leave a scratch on the rock in front of them to pass. No weapons aside from those provided were allowed, though bare hands could be used. Each applicant had 3 attempts. Zeke did not see this as a difficult test. Langus was horrified, while Zeke wondered what the surprise was, as all one had to do was scratch the rock. He had expected a more difficult trial, given the dragon blood ordeal, and was disappointed by the simplicity. The first applicant struck the rock with all his might, shattering his sword and creating a deafening noise. Despite his strength, he failed to leave a scratch. He collapsed in pain, unable to continue, and forfeited. Zeke noticed Langus acting strangely, questioning why. Since the exam seemed easy, Zeke asked Langus about the rock, learning it was called the Regeneration Stone, capable of repairing minor scratches instantaneously. It could also reflect damage 100-fold if attacked with brute force. Zeke concluded the rock was extraordinary. Langus explained that a scratch could be made if one properly circulated their ether source power, meaning technique mattered more than raw martial arts skill. Zeke assessed the other participants, noting that many, including Retin and his gang, seemed capable of passing. He observed applicants failing one by one, their arms broken from attempting to scratch the rock. When the examiner called Zeke's number, Langus feared for him and urged withdrawal, but Zeke assured him he would be fine. Stepping forward, Zeke sensed immense pressure and aura emanating from himself. He declined to use a weapon, intending to rely on his bare hands. The examiner asked for confirmation, and Zeke affirmed his choice, confident his fists would suffice. Other students mocked him, doubting his ability to scratch the rock with bare hands. Even Langus feared for him, thinking his arms might be torn off, and blamed himself for not stopping Zeke. Since Zeke had made his decision, the examiner allowed him to proceed. Zeke examined the rock, noting it was made of a mineral he had never seen before, formed over 1,000 years. Aware of how much he didn't know, he decided to focus on the task at hand. He powered up, believing he had enough strength. Using the dragon Dragon Slayer combat technique form, a bright yellow aura enveloped his body and arm as he struck the rock. The top of the rock shattered with a loud noise and dust cloud. Everyone was surprised except the examiner, who maintained a serious demeanor. Zeke sighed in relief, but noticed the technique was advanced for his age. He checked his bleeding arm and torn uniform, concluding that his training still needed improvement. Other students wondered how he accomplished it, while Retin was furious at Zeke's success. Langus, stunned, struggled to comprehend that Zeke, of all people, had passed. The examiner considered the feat impossible, as only someone ranked 4 stars or higher should have shattered the regeneration stone. Curious about Zeke's abilities, given his illegitimate status, the examiner noted that he had seen the move before. Zeke approached the examiner and asked how he fared in the test. The examiner confirmed that he had passed and handed him a bottle containing a green substance. Zeke asked the junior examiner about it, but the man merely glared, telling him to move aside. Assuming it was a reward, Zeke returned to Langus, who praised his performance. Langus explained that the bottle contained a healing potion. Zeke was confused upon hearing this, and Langus explained that it was a normal-grade healing potion. He examined the bottle and realized the substance did not appear poisonous. He began to wonder if the potion might actually be an elixir. An elixir, he recalled, was a potion made from extremely rare materials combined with herbs that grew only in secret realms. Pure elixir cores from divine and phantom beasts were also added. Drinking an elixir could heal old and recent wounds instantly, while also boosting one's ether. However, refining an elixir was incredibly difficult due to the rarity of its ingredients, which is why it rarely appeared on the market. Zeke consumed the healing potion, and as expected, his torn arms healed immediately. He was astonished and realized that the healing potion was, in fact, an elixir. Langus admitted that he did not know what an elixir was, but noted that Eldragon healing potions were far superior to those obtained from stores. Zeke was completely blown away as all his injuries had healed instantly, although he noticed there was no ether surge like a true elixir would produce. Langus told Zeke that he was impressive, but Zeke remained unconvinced. He examined the bottle, realizing it represented what human knowledge had achieved over a millennium. Langus reminded Zeke of his strength, to which Zeke replied that he aimed to be the strongest and was unsurprised by his own abilities. Retin and his gang of bullies stepped forward to take their tests, and all passed. Zeke was not surprised, knowing they would succeed. Applicant 414 was called next, Langus. As he walked down the stairs, Zeke noticed Langus was nervous and encouraged him to pull himself together, assuring him he would be fine. Langus turned around, telling Zeke not to raise the bar so high. At the test site, Langus picked up a sword, leaving Zeke to wonder what he was doing. Langus struck the rock with a deep breath but failed to leave a scratch and fell in the process. The examiner reminded him that he had 2 more attempts. Langus tried again, but the result remained the same. He fell to the ground in tears, fearing he would fail just as his bullies had predicted. As expected, Retin and his friends laughed, mocking Langus as half-dragon and urging him to give up, reminding Zeke that he had claimed Langus was stronger than them. The examiner informed Langus that he had only 1 attempt left. Langus began to panic, falling into a state of despair, when Zeke's voice reached him, asking what he was doing. Confused, Langus turned around, and Zeke suggested that he try using a spear instead of a sword. Langus hesitated, but Zeke insisted, berating him for using an unsuitable weapon. He assured Langus that no matter how many times he used a sword, he would not damage the rock. Retin and his gang laughed again, claiming Langus would remain pathetic even with a spear. Zeke asked the examiner if weapon changes were allowed mid-test, and the examiner confirmed it was fine. Zeke smiled at Langus, telling him to go ahead and use the spear. Standing with the confidence of a motivational speaker, Zeke asked if Langus was ready to quit like a loser, but Langus refused. Taking Zeke's advice, Langus picked up the spear. He thought of his father, who had been denied entry to the dragon's nest and constantly mocked, yet had raised him well. Determined to prove he was not a fake, Langus trusted Zeke's guidance. Despite never having used a spear, he followed Zeke's instructions to thrust it straight without overthinking. Langus noticed the ether source energy flowing differently through his body compared to when wielding a sword. He rushed toward the stone and struck, producing a massive shockwave. Retin and his gang initially laughed, dismissing the weapon change, but then realized Langus had succeeded. Even the examiner could not believe that Langus had pierced the stone with the spear. Zeke proudly clapped for Langus, who could hardly hardly believe his eyes when the examiner recorded that he had passed. He confirmed with Zeke, who reassured him that he had indeed succeeded. Tears of happiness streamed down Langus's face as he embraced Zeke. Retin and his gang refused to believe Langus had passed, attributing it to luck. The examiner shouted that the exam was over and the entrance ceremony would begin, surprising Zeke. He could not believe scratching the rock was the only required test. Langus suggested that another exam might await them after entering the academy. Zeke asked what would happen next, and Langus explained that the Eldragon family heads would arrive to congratulate the participants. A group of aura farming men appeared in the distance, approaching the students. One figure caught Zeke's attention, and he asked Langus about the gloomy man. Langus could not believe Zeke had insulted the family head. Zeke, unfazed, called the man ugly, but Langus quickly covered his mouth, begging him to stay quiet. Despite the difficulty, Zeke obeyed. Zeke observed the men, the Eldragon forces, noting their impressive strength, mostly 6-star warriors. The head of the family, Balza Eldragon, was an 8-star warrior, making him a formidable presence. In Zeke's time, there were only a few 8-star warriors in the world, leaving him to wonder how many remained. He shared his feelings with Langus, stating that he disliked Balza, regardless of whether he was his father. Balza stepped forward, exuding overwhelming aura as he addressed the students, instructing them to become the flesh and blood of the Eldragon family. His words carried crushing weight, causing all students except Zeke to tremble. Even Langus struggled to breathe, but Zeke felt nothing except pure hatred, for reasons he could not explain. After addressing the students, Balza departed. Another elder took over, praising the students and expressing high expectations. Zeke noticed the blonde-haired elder and wondered about him. Balza's departure eased some tension, though students remained composed. The examiner stepped forward to announce dormitory assignments. Zeke was shocked, having assumed everyone would stay together. Langus explained that the academy had 4 dorms: East, West, North, and South. Students were assigned accordingly. When Zeke heard his name, he stood to leave, exchanging pleasantries with Langus. He had been assigned to the East dorm and was surprised by how much had changed over 1,000 years. Following the directions on a note, he navigated to his room, worried his roommate would be angry for his late arrival. Finally reaching the door, Zeke opened it enthusiastically to greet his new roommate, but his excitement vanished when he saw who it was.